That being said, we're going to kick off the show with our first guest. We have Joe Espinola. He is a candidate running for state senate in the 2nd Essex Middlesex District, which covers Lawrence, Dracut, Andover, and Tewksbury. Joe, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. People are asking, why are you going to Chelmsford? It's just, I think when you resonate, you have a message that to put it out to as many people as you can. I think it's important for my campaign.
Well, we're going to hope that we get this show out to the greater Lowell area. Certainly, hopefully get it out to Dracut and Tewksbury and maybe Andover and Lawrence as well. We do believe in the state level politics and what's going on, so we appreciate you coming on. I know a lot of people may not have heard of you. This is an opportunity to really give yourself an opportunity to be known. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what brought you to this point of running for state senate.
So my name is Joe Espinola, and I was born in Lowell, born and raised in Lowell, and I was born in the back central part of Lowell, which was next to the housing projects. And there were a lot of drugs, a lot of bad things going on, and the kind of tag of the neighborhood was you get out of Back Central Street two ways: in a box to the undertaker, or you got an education and you moved out. So we moved out. My father moved there with my mom so that they could take care of my grandparents. My father eventually got another two-family and brought my grandparents with us. So we moved out of Back Central Street. My dad was a firefighter, 32 years as a firefighter. And growing up, he was pretty much the person who had led me to public service. My dad took a $7,000 pay cut in the 1960s when he was working at GE to take the fire department job. And he used to joke around when he was still alive that the first year of his retirement, he made more than he did the first 18 years that he was actually working on the fire department. So he used to joke around that. I don't know if it was that funny to him, but it was one of those things that he thought the sacrifice was worth it. And if you fast forward to myself, I was working my way through college. I was working full-time. I was also playing baseball, and I was lucky enough to have a trade as a graduate from Greater Lowell that was able to get some tuition assistance from my employers and also be able to enjoy playing a sport at the same time. And at the time, I took the police test and I got 100. And the cards would come to my dad's house, and you only get 3 shots. And if they send you 3 cards, they don't send you another card. And my dad knew that, and he said to me, "How come you're not going to take the police department?" I said, "I can't afford to go to the police department," because at the time I was working at the prison in Concord, the wall at the Rotary in Concord, Mass, for the Mass Department of Correction. I was a correction officer, and I said I can't afford to leave it. I got to pay for my school, and at the time I wanted to be an attorney. My dad and my mom, my older brother and sister had moved out of the house, and they said, "Look, if you take the police job, we'll pay for your last semester and books and whatever you need for your last year." I'm sorry. And I says, "All right, I'll do that." And I had some side jobs that I was able to take care of the rest of it. But I took a $17,000 pay cut when I left the prison system to go to Lowell Police. And I always wanted to be a firefighter, and that didn't work out. But I say now that I think God was telling me, you need to be a police officer. This is where you need to go, because I spent most of my time as a family services police officer and detective, and I got to spend a lot of time with some families, helping some families out and doing some really neat things for them, including back then, we're talking the 80s and the 90s, that drug use was not as prevalent as it is now. So you didn't really see much of it. So it was a thing that I was able to reach out, connect to people that weren't doing well, that weren't focusing on their life, that weren't taking care of their education, that weren't. So I was able to help a large number of kids by reaching out to them and trying to push them in a different way than they are. When I was 22, I lost my brother, my older brother. He was my hero. He used to take me to the boys' club and the Y. He was a lot older than me. He was the oldest of all four of us, and we lost him to addiction. And when that happened, to me, I remember seeing that there was always a place for him to go, but not a continuance for him to take care of himself, to do whatever. When he passed away, I don't want to say I wasn't surprised, but it just, at that time, it just didn't seem like there was any other options for him. And so that kind of pushed me into my police stuff and to get more involved in it, to help these kids so that they could have someone like my brother, to me, to push them in a way. And to this day, I still see kids that I helped, and I still see mothers and fathers and grandparents that I was involved in their families. Some of them, unfortunately, I had to bring them to identify their sons or daughters during some unfortunate incidents, and they appreciate it. And it's something that you can always put that in your pocket and say, you know what I did is why I did it, and that's what it is. And ultimately, I'm no longer a police officer. I was retired. I jumped into the river to save a guy who tried to kill himself, and a police officer jumped in to help me, and I had to save both of them. And I ended up rupturing my bicep tendon and tearing apart my rotator cuff. And so I saved both their lives, but unfortunately that was the end of my police career. And I think that, like we go back to earlier, God has a plan for everybody. I think this is my calling. I think that I have the experience where I grew up, the people I grew up with, the people that I lost growing up with. Because my brother wasn't the only one. And with all the things that are going on in the communities now, where problems seem to be festering, I have a grip on all those things. I've lived them. I've talked about them at my family table with personal stories about some of these things. I mean, I joke about it to my sister, but I'm sure it's not a joke to her. My sister's gay, and she went into the service, and she went through the don't ask, don't tell. And it was hard for her. It was hard for her to be there. And I joke about it to her, like haphazardly. I'll say to her, "You were gay when it wasn't cool to be gay." And I saw her live through that. I saw her live through that portion. I saw her live through her service portion. I saw my brother go through what he went through. I saw my parents go through what they do. And I saw that there was a gap between the bottom two kids and the older two kids. And I saw the difference between the way that my older brother and sister grew up and the way that my sister and myself grew up. And it always resonated to me that people just need a lift up. They just need something and somehow for them to lift up. They just hanging on the edge, just one lift up, one person to say, you can do this, you can get this, you're all set. And that's how I've always lived my life, based upon the values that my parents have brought up to me. So I think that, and I say this, and not in a quirky way, I have to do this. I don't want to per se, but I have to do this. I think it's time for some common sense, street people, and not a street people for the sense, but from what I've lived and my experiences, and I grew up right across the street from the housing project. I know what all of the people in those housing projects went through. And I just think it's time for somebody to go into the state legislature, to have an idea, to have a plan, to have a notion, to understand when their constituents come to them and say, I can't do this because of this, and understand, because I've anticipated that, and I've gone through it, and I've helped people through either my police stuff or through my regular everyday stuff. I'm a community volunteer. I'm a coach, and there isn't anything right now. I'm running back and forth to Lawrence, delivering supplies to people. So there isn't anything that I say no to. So it's one of those things that I just feel like this is the next part of my life, and I'm really looking forward to representing my district.
Now, this isn't your first foray into volunteering. You've been a part of the Lowell Technical
Yes.
School Committee. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I graduated from Greater Lowell in 1983. And I was currently a police officer, and they had retired me. And there was a big commotion going on about the superintendent of schools. They had 212 votes for the superintendent of schools. And every day there was a story in the newspaper that was dragging the school that I loved and made me who I am through the mud. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to run for that seat. There wasn't anybody on that seat that was holding the seat that had done anything to not deserve to be on there again, but I think they needed somebody that came from there, and somebody that was level-headed and compromisable. And I ran against an incumbent that was there for a number of years, and I beat him. And people couldn't believe that I ended up beating him. So I sat there for the first meeting, and the first thing they were talking about in the meeting was the reconstruction of Greater Lowell School. And right after they open it up with the construction meeting minutes, they start talking about hazardous waste and construction and everything. And I have a contractor's background. So we pulled the brakes on a lot of things, and I think that was my calling at that time, to go there and help them, because people, I think, were trying to pull the blinds over them. So I ended up, I was on the board. I'm still on the board currently. I'm the chairman of the board right now, and I'm in my 5th year right now. And it's probably the worst part of running for state senate, that I won't be able to serve on the Greater Lowell board anymore, but we'll be able to help them when I get elected. So I'm kind of just looking at the halves and halves, and looking forward to bringing education and technical education back to the communities, especially the technical part, to bring it back to the traditional high schools. And you and I have had touch base on that. I think that there should be some technical skills in a traditional high school, whatever it is. You have, in my district, there are 4 separate technical schools. Not everybody wants to play football. Not everybody wants to play lacrosse. Not everybody wants to be on the drama team. Not everybody wants to, but there might be some people who want to take electrical or carpentry or plumbing. You put the kids in the bus to go play football. Why can't you put the kids in a bus to go to the technical schools to learn a trade? And then they can find out if that's what they really want to do. Let's explore what I can do after me, but I don't want to go to college and throw $200,000-$300,000 on my back for loans. So that's going to be one of my biggest things that I want to accomplish. I want to get back to not teaching to test, because it's taken up too much time, and it doesn't seem to be progressing the way that they thought it is. I think we need to go back to the traditional schools like you and I had when we were growing up. I learned how to sew, I learned how to cook, I learned how to cut boards, I learned how to do everything, home economics and those such things. And I think kids need to experience some part of that in their lives, and we should make it available. And we're fortunate enough right now to have a governor who actually believes what I'm saying. And we've had many, many conversations for long periods of times. We have at Greater Lowell, and we're not just Greater Lowell, most of the technical schools in my district have been the benefactors of Governor Baker providing us with grants to do things. We at Greater Lowell are over $1 million, and he provided us with some state-of-the-art machine tools and machine computers. And the kids that are in co-op on those jobs are making between $20 and $30 an hour on co-op. So I was telling the governor the other night, he couldn't believe it. And those are some of the things that we need to move forward. We need to get those things. So that's what I want to work on. I want to work on fixing the problems, the opiate abuse. I don't think that there's a reason that politicians say that we have lowered the number of overdoses. We did not lower the number of overdoses. We lowered the number of overdose deaths. The number of overdoses are going up and up and up, and it's because Narcan is available, and it's being masqueraded by a tool, Narcan. Now, if you toss in, you could have Narcan at your house, and you can give Narcan to your neighbor. You can give Narcan to your son. We don't know about those. We don't know anything about those. We don't know the tools or whatever. So I think we need to take the addiction part of it. Take care of the people who are addicted right now. Mental health. Why are they addicted? What's the problem? What are they doing? Give them a reason, and I say mind, body, and health. Give them a reason to get over whatever the reason is that they're self-medicating. Get them body-wise healthy, and then maybe bring them to the trade schools. Give them a trade so that when they get up in the morning, they feel good about themselves. Entitlement, not empower, not entitle. And we've had those conversations before. I think if you give a person some self-worth and some revelation to themselves, I think that would take care of a lot of the problems. And we got to go back to education. Say no to drugs was big when we were growing up. Say no to drugs, the platform, no smoking, no drugs, no anything. That's what we should be going back to take care of the kids in the lower grades, to get them to not, no, if you take drugs, you're going to die. Just be flat out and say, yeah, you're going to die. Not, we'll give you Narcan if you overdose. And then the people that are addicted already, we got to help them. But if we catch it low enough, we should be able to change the momentum of this scourge that's afflicting our society.
I think the one thing, just as a feedback point, is that in life, you tend to fall into some of these drug-related issues as a result of peer pressure, and not in the sense of, they'd run those commercials where they'd say, hey kid, you want to do these drugs? It doesn't necessarily roll out in that kind of capacity. It's really more of your friends are doing it. You feel this kind of obligation to be doing it, to be within those social circles. Maybe some more target marketing towards that to try to keep kids from feeling like they have to do it to feel cool or be part of,
No, you're 2,000% right. My brother hung around with kids that did drugs. And what did he do? He did drugs. I hung around kids that played sports. What did I do? Played sports. No drugs. And I think, honestly, if I hung around with kids that did drugs, I'd probably do drugs. And it goes right back to what you just said. It's 100% correct. That's how it is. It's definitely a social, learned process that kids just want to feel like they're part of whatever's going on.
Still education related, but want to ask you, Chapter 70 funding, how do you feel about that? And, I know here in Chelmsford we feel that, there's been some, issues as far as the funding formula, and just curious if that's something you'd be looking at when you get up to the state level.
So when I first ran for Greater Lowell, it was 6 years ago. I wasn't on the board yet. I sat down with a bunch of state legislators that we both know, and I asked them about the state funding. I said, it doesn't seem to be fair to the communities. It just doesn't seem to be doled out fair, and they tried to explain it to me according to the assessors database and the demographics and all that stuff, and I just never thought that it was fair for anybody. It didn't seem fair to me, and it seemed old. When you went to read the formula, like, who talks about this anymore? Like, it needs to change. We need to come up with something. And I was told that we don't want to change it because our communities might lose. And I said, well, maybe they might gain. You don't know, but I think we should change the formula with the A, B's, and C's and the variables and come up with something else and just check out, run a dry run. I was very disappointed. So a short answer to your question is I am 4,000% changing the Chapter 7 formula. But I was very disappointed at the end of the session when the legislators didn't go in and at least throw out a draft of what it is, so that people like yourself, people like me, we could go and we could give some input so that we could go back and forth. Because mind you, I'm on the board. I work with the budgets, and you've worked with budgets. A lot of these people that are elected, they've never worked with a budget. They say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But they've never worked with a budget, a contract, or anything like that. So I think it's really important for someone who hasn't ever held an office in a school committee environment, or a town, or a selectman, or a city councilor spot, that they reach out, they meaning the elected legislator, that they reach out to us and say, look, we've lived it. We know what it's like. We know what we can't do. You have, just a quick example is in Lowell. They said, we're going to give you, I don't know, $1.8 million. Well, they left the session and they didn't set aside the $1.8 million. So they had to wait till they come back for session. So what does Lowell do now? They're in session right now. How does Lowell, do we get it? Do we not get it? Whatever. And I saw in the paper today that they were deciding what they were going to do with $1.3 billion left over. So I don't understand how it becomes a problem to fully fund our school system. What's the problem? We fully fund everything else. Why does it stop when it gets to schools? And it stops because there is an emotional value with the people who live in the towns and the cities that they say, I want the best education for my kid, so I'll pay more. But we should be getting it from the state. And there are a lot of places that we can get it from the state. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of taxes that are supposed to be set aside for certain things that aren't set aside for certain things. And I think we need to get back to looking at things. If you're going to raise a tax on cigarettes so that you're going to have education for kids not to smoke, well, then that money should be set aside for education for kids not to smoke, not put into the general fund. If you're gonna raise taxes on whatever for roads and bridges and whatever, well, that money should be set aside for roads and bridges and whatever, not put into the general fund, so it can get chopped up and set out, and everybody an election year can say, oh, look what I did, look what I got, whatever. But you know what? Drive around the state of Massachusetts, and you can always tell when you get to Massachusetts. I don't need to see the big sign. All I need to feel is that big pothole that I hit right after the line. So we got to do something about what we're doing with the money that we're collecting already. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And we have $1.3 billion, and it's sometimes, some people say $1.8 billion. And we're putting it into free cash, and then we're going to raise the taxes. It's the catch-all for the people that are elected. We'll just go after the people that are here, that are taxpayers, and we'll raise their taxes a few bucks, and they'll pay for it, and we'll put this money in free cash. And I think people are tired of it. People are like, I know I can't do it anymore. I can't. My pockets are inside out. I can't do it anymore. And I want you to do what you said you were going to do with the money that you charged me for before. So it's as simple as that.
Your opponent, I know this is an open seat. He had held the seat before at some point. Talk a little bit about really what's the difference between you and your opponent, and what's going to be the kind of the difference maker in this election.
Well, I'll tell you the biggest difference between my opponent and myself is he has raised almost $500,000 and I have not. I'm a little over 10 grand right now, and I'm making the best of my money that I'm doing, and I say he's not going to outwork me. He's going to outraise me. He's not going to outwork me. I have more touches than him. I have more events, community events. I'm out there all the time. It's one of those things that he's put $150,000 of his own money into this race. For what? It doesn't. He has to be in this office for 7 years to get back what he has raised so far. So I don't think that he wants to stay here, and that has been his mantra. He has run for offices, and he's won the office, and he's left that office in the middle of the term to run for a higher office, and he's done that on 4 different occasions. And the last one, he left the state senate position, and he went to run for treasurer. And now he's back again, and I don't believe he's running because he wants to be the senator. I think he wants to be the senator so he can have a name for when Elizabeth Warren runs for office, or say Bill Galvin. I mean, he's getting up there, or one of those other spots come up, that he is not the former senator, he's the senator of the state of Massachusetts. And with me, Barry, he seems to fall in line with what the Democrats do on Beacon Hill. And our district is not fall in line type of a district. So three of my districts are towns. They seem to be conservative. Lawrence is my 4th town, city, and they have a mentality now that we have been promised A through Z for all the years that I've been in this city, and no one ever follows through with it. And they hold that carrot over our heads every single year. They hold a comprehensive immigration reform. They hold public safety. And they say they're going to do that. But if you walk around to the places in Lawrence who provide services to people, the people who say they're going to do things for the city of Lawrence, they're nowhere to be found. They come and they take pictures when the governor comes, or someone's there, they take pictures. But they always say there's never any funding that follows it. And I said, why do you think that's the case? And they say, because if they give us funding, they're admitting that there's a problem. And they don't want to admit there's a problem, so we end up funding ourselves. And I'm getting this right from the people that are the frontline people helping the people in Lawrence who need services. And so I think that, just look at the last election. Look at the congressional election. Everybody, and I told everybody who wanted to listen, I don't think the current senator is going to do as well as you think she is in Lawrence. I just don't see it. Going around to people, talking to people, I just think that they're up for a change. They're just looking for a change. What the heck, I'll vote for this one, I'll vote for that one. We'll see what happens. And because we've been promised so many things. So I think between me and my opponent, he's going in there business as usual. And he's going to just pick up the torch and carry it the way it's been carried for a number of years. There's never been anybody else other than someone from Andover that has been the senator in the seat.
Well, we have 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask you first, if people are interested in helping Joe Espinola run for office, how can they find out more information about you? How can they get in touch with you?
They can go to Joe Espinola for Senate at Facebook, and they can go for Joe Espinola for Senate.com is my email address, and my cell phone number is 978-337-8427. And if you go to those websites, and if you are in my district, we can provide you with signs, And there's also, if you're not in my district and you like what I said, there's also a way that you can donate on my website, joeespinola.com, joeespinola4senate.com.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to ask you to look into the camera and ask the voters for the vote.
This camera here?
Yes, please.
All right, there you go. My name's Joe Espinola. I would appreciate your vote, your consideration, and if you're not in my district, reach out to all the people in your districts, Tewksbury, Andover, Drake, and Lawrence. I believe that I'll bring a different sense of flavor to this seat that will be best for most people. I want to bring Lawrence back into the fold so they're not 100% funded by the state. The way that the cities run right now is starting to roll off the edges. We need to take care of that. We need to take care of Lawrence. We need to bring some more people living into Lawrence. We need to take care of the people that are in Lawrence, all the people that live in Lawrence currently, not sanctuary cities, not sanctuary states. Let's work out and try to provide a comprehensive system where people that are here that are undocumented can find a pathway to citizenship. And I really mean that. In my whole adult life, I've heard people say, we're going to get a comprehensive immigration reform and we're going to make it work. And no one does it, because once they take care of that immigration reform, then the people are no longer going to vote. So it's one of those things. I think we need to take care of it, not only locally, but nationally as well. And again, Joe Espinola, 2nd Essex and Middlesex, Lawrence, Drake, Andover, and Tewksbury. I appreciate your vote, all your families. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it.
I appreciate it.